I know that a lot of you are probably, well, those of you who have tuned in before are probably thinking, wrong Rachel. But Rachel Hazen took off tonight, and she gave me the honor of introducing tonight's Instagram Live. For everyone who's catching up and hasn't really watched any of them before, over the summer, the SBH Fertility Division hosted a 3-part series following the journey of 3 different couples through infertility and postpartum depression. And it was extremely successful. Thank God. Our last video had almost 3,500 views. And we decided it was time for an encore presentation. So thank you so much, Liat, for being here. We have Liat Kassin here. She's going to talk about her experience and her journey through infertility. And we are also extremely honored to have her doctor. When I sign off, he's going to join in. Dr. Isaac Sasson, who is the Medical and IVF Director for Shady Grove Fertility. And he will help us understand and clarify the medical journey, the emotional, the physical, everything through IVF. And he'll also be available to answer some questions at the end. Just before we start, though, I want to give everybody a little bit of an update to what we've been up to. We just finished a fertility support group, and we have another sign up for fertility and postpartum depression, another support group starting right after the holidays. We have our peer-to-peer program is really going strong. We delivered almost 100 care packages to people starting their journey through infertility. We offer yoga, which I know you do, right, Liat?
I love yoga. I can't live without it.
You can attest to how amazing it is, both pre and post treatments, to relax the body, the nerves, the mind. We have nurses on call with us to help answer questions and offer some guidance through the treatment. We have a quarterly newsletter that goes out. We have individual and group counseling, and that's really been amazing. We've really had amazing progress since our launch in 2019, and thank you to everybody who helped contribute to it, including our viewers who have been following us over the last few months with these lives. We're very grateful to you. So this particular live, now I'm really nervous. This particular live really strikes a chord with me, and it's the reason why I agreed to introduce it. It's because for the last 12 years, most of you don't know, I've experienced infertility and have gone through IVF many, many times. And so this one really hit home. My world of IVF really just consisted of my doctor, myself, my husband, and we also sought rabbinical guidance and counseling, which was extremely beneficial and helpful and necessary to our journey. But nonetheless, I felt like I was the only person suffering. And I don't know, Liat, if you share those feelings, but sometimes you feel like you're the only person in the world that's experiencing something like this, even when you know you're not. My husband and I walked through a very dark place alone, and that can't happen anymore because we have breached the stigma and we have opened up the floodgate, and this has to change. So if anybody is hiding behind this anonymous screen watching this live, walking a very lonely journey, I am begging you to please let SBH Fertility be your first phone call when you feel like you have nobody to turn to. We are an ear to listen. We are a hand to hold. We are a shoulder to cry on. And when you are ready to charge through to the other side, we want to be there to guide you through that maze, because it's tricky and it's ins and outs, but we will be with you every step of the way. I once fought a battle that I thought that nobody understood, but that's changing because we right now, and the last few months, we've been opening this conversation. We're beginning to educate the community about infertility and about infertility treatment by joining forces with amazing doctors like Dr. Sasson, who's joining us tonight. But most importantly, we've opened up the relationship with you guys, our viewers and your families and our community members, because we don't want anybody to walk through a dark place alone. So Without further ado, our encore presentation. Thank you so much, Liat. I'm going to sign off, and Dr. Sasson's going to join in. And everybody, please enjoy and learn from tonight's Instagram Live.
Well, Rachel, amazing. I cried, and we're only 5 minutes in.
Don't cry, don't cry, don't cry. I'm going to watch you now, and I can't thank you enough for opening up about a topic that I was afraid to open up about. So you are very brave and very strong, and we are very grateful to you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll see you. I'm going to watch.
Well, okay, so now how does this work? Okay, so Rachel left. Guys, bear with me. Now I'm just waiting for Dr. Sasson to request. I don't know how this works. I don't know if he requested already. Okay. So Dr. Sasson, I see that you're on, but I think you need to request to join. Yep. Wait, I'm seeing 2 people requested, but I'm only... Okay, no. Okay, so Dr. Sasson, your request disappeared. Do you want to do it one more time? Sorry, guys. See, technology's supposed to be easy, but it's really not. Oh, here we go. Okay. See it?
Hey!
Hi, we did
Hi,
it. We did it.
It's really nice to see you. Thank you
Nice
for
to see you
inviting me.
too. Well, I think this is the biggest coincidence ever.
So, so my name's Ike Sasson. I'm a reproductive endocrinologist. I work at Shady Grove Fertility. Just a little bit about me, and then we're going to talk to Liat for tonight. I'm going to interview her, and you guys kind of get to see. I'm going to teach a little bit, and then you're going to talk. We're going to see what it's like to go through IVF. And this is kind of what a conversation is like when the patient sits down with the doctor. And so I grew up in Deal, and I graduated Hillel, class of 92. Very proud, very prominent class, a lot of famous alumni. After high school, I was at YU, and then I did an MD and a PhD in genetics at Yale. I was at Penn for my fertility fellowship, and then I started a large practice, now a large practice in Pennsylvania. I live outside of Philadelphia, and it's called Shady Grove Fertility. We also have offices now in Manhattan and in Brooklyn. Dr. Robbie Seton, who spoke last week, will be in our Brooklyn office starting in January. And so we're going to talk about IVF today. And a little bit of background. I'm going to spend a few minutes doing background, and then we're going to hear from Liat about her experience. So infertility is super common. It affects 1 in 8 couples. And the challenge that Rachel talked about before is that it has been stigmatized and not a lot of people talk about it. And we need to be talking about it. And I'm super proud of everybody here that's talking about it to each other and family and friends and supporting people that are going through this process. And it's a journey. And it's not easy, and we don't always know where it ends. And so having a baby is hard. It takes 3 things. It's a uterus and fallopian tubes, sperm, and eggs. And every month, a woman has a group of eggs that are available. Those eggs live in a little sac in the ovary called follicles. And every month, a woman has a group of these follicles. These are this month's eggs. Her brain makes a hormone called follicle stimulating hormone that tells one of those follicles to grow big, to become 20 millimeters. And in the middle of the month, there'll be an ovulation. The egg is released. Ovulation is the craziest part of reproduction. I can't believe anybody ever gets pregnant. We would never design a system this way. The ovary and the fallopian tube are not connected to each other. There's a really big space in between. Your appendix and intestine are there. And so when that egg is released, it's just bouncing around your belly. The end of the tube has to catch it and vacuum it up. If it makes it to the tube, it will live for 1 day. If there was relations that week and sperm meet egg, it can make an embryo. That's the vocabulary. Sperm can fertilize an egg to make an embryo. And 5 days later, that embryo gets pushed to the uterus where it needs to implant. And if it does that, you'll make pregnancy hormone and miss your period. And if it doesn't happen, meaning the sperm didn't find the egg, then 2 weeks after ovulation, the period comes. So it is not easy to have a baby, even when everything's working or everything looks right. And so sometimes people get help. And it depends on your age, how long you should be trying on your own. But assuming you're under 35 years old and you have regular cycles, and maybe you've been trying for a year without success, it's time to talk to a doctor. Doesn't mean you need treatment. It means you need evaluation. And there are a number of things we could find. Sometimes we find there's not enough sperm. Sometimes we find there's not a lot of eggs. Sometimes the tubes don't work. They can't catch the egg. Sometimes there's a problem with the uterus where it may be misshapen or the embryo has trouble attaching. So there's a number of conditions that can happen to couples that they need help having a baby. And so at some point you see a reproductive endocrinologist and we have an evaluation, we have a discussion, we do some testing, we try to find what the problem is. And 10% of the time we don't find anything wrong. And that's super frustrating, isn't it, Liat?
It's,
yeah, what do
to
you
say
call
the
it?
least.
What do you call it when you can't find anything wrong?
Unexplained infertility.
Unexplained. It's super annoying.
And
that is the 10% of couples. And not everybody's unexplained forever. Because what it takes to achieve a pregnancy, what it takes to be successful, we can look back retrospectively and say, what did we learn from the journey? And we typically find one of three things. Either the tubes, while they look open, weren't working. They couldn't catch the egg. It's possible that the quality of the eggs was lower than expected, meaning a woman has more abnormal ones than she should. Or it's possible that the sperm can't penetrate the egg. And there's a number of different treatments that we offer couples. Sometimes, and you may have heard in the past, we may use a treatment called superovulation, where we try to get more than one egg to be released. And sometimes we talk about a treatment called IVF, in vitro fertilization. And that's what we're going to spend a few minutes talking about tonight. So let's give a little bit of context, okay? And let's hear from Liat first before we get into the nitty-gritty of IVF. Liat, let's start your journey. So how long were you and Stephen trying for before you got help?
so I was...
How old were you?
So I was... I'm not good at math. 26
Okay.
to 25, between 25 and 26. And we were
Yep.
trying for about a year and a half at that point.
A year and a half.
Before we decided to go to a fertility doctor.
And were you getting periods every month?
I was getting periods every month. I was regular
Okay.
I'm clockwork since
Right.
I'm
So you were dropped every month. You were releasing an egg.
yes.
And you were getting the timing right. You were using like ovulation predictor kits, maybe.
So I wasn't using any predictor kits, but what I was doing was I downloaded one of those apps and I would just put it in and I saw exactly what was happening and
Good. So you had a good sense of what your body was doing.
yes.
You were timing things properly, but it wasn't working.
Exactly.
Okay. So your doctor did an evaluation. So you went to a doctor.
I went to a doctor. It was a really, really big practice. So, and we're going to talk about that later.
So it was a big practice in Manhattan.
Big practice. Did all the testing, the blood work, I don't know what that other thing it's called where you do the sonogram with that, the colored fluid.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
The HSG, the X-ray test about the tubes.
Yep.
Yep.
Did it all. The conclusion was unexplained infertility. And then we kind of went right into it where we did, I went through 3 cycles of IUIs.
What's an IUI, Liat?
Artificial insemination.
Okay. With your husband's sperm.
With my husband. Yes.
Okay, good.
I would hope so. So 3 IUIs with Clomid and 3 IUIs without Clomid.
Okay. Do you get
And
pregnant?
all, I did not get pregnant. All 6
Okay.
failed.
Okay. So then what did the doctor recommend? So everything looks good. He gave you a reasonable treatment. It still didn't work. You're now 2 years into trying.
Yep.
How you feeling? How you feeling at this point?
Pretty crappy.
Yeah.
Sad, confused, nervous. I don't know what my future is going to look like. I don't know how much longer I can take it, how much longer I can continue going through this. It was scary, to say the least.
Because what was your biggest fear?
Going through all this and then ending up without kids.
Yeah. That's
You know,
super scary.
I feel like it is.
Yeah. I know. Because we come from a place where it's all about family.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's
That's
tied
what
to,
it's about.
it's tied to who we are as
Yeah.
individuals, as people. I know. Okay. So this is real deal. This is big stuff on the line. So what did your doctor say? What do you tell you to do next?
So IVF. So we were starting the process, prepping the body, doing everything we needed to do, and now it was time to go through IVF.
Okay. I'm going to pause you there for a second. Okay.
Okay.
So IVF, I want to teach a little bit about IVF, okay? Because not everybody knows what it is. And so IVF, or in vitro fertilization, is a process where we try to rescue a whole group of eggs from the ovary. Not just 2 or 3 like the Clomid treatment does, but as many as we safely can. And instead of releasing them, I go and get them. So I'm getting the eggs directly from the ovary. I'm bypassing the fallopian tubes. I could combine this, and so this is a really nice treatment for unexplained infertility. Because if the tubes aren't working, we're getting the eggs directly from the ovary. And we could then combine sperm and egg in the laboratory. And there are different ways of combining sperm and egg. Sometimes we use something called conventional insemination, where we put the sperm around the eggs. And sometimes we directly inject the sperm into the egg. So if the sperm's not penetrating it, one of the reasons for unexplained, we are going to do that job in the laboratory. We can then grow the embryos for 5 days. And on day 5, the embryo is a ball of 200 cells. It looks like a soccer ball. The outside of the ball becomes the placenta. And there's a dense cluster of stem cells in the middle that become the baby. And those are the embryos that can stick into somebody's body. And those are the embryos that we can test to figure out which are the normal ones with the right amount of DNA, 23 pairs of chromosomes. Women are 46XX, men are 46XY. And which are the abnormal ones with missing or extra DNA. Those are the miscarriages and the negative tests. Each normal embryo that we find has a 65% chance of delivery, 6-5. Still not 100. 2 out of 3 people are going to take home a baby from the hospital with a normal embryo. And so there are 2 parts to IVF, a fresh cycle and a frozen embryo transfer. The fresh cycle is about getting the eggs out and making the embryos. The frozen cycle is about putting an embryo back in your body. Now I'm describing to you how I do IVF, and it's based in science, but it's also an art, and not everybody's the same artist. And so when we start IVF, the first step is to synchronize the group of eggs. I want to make them all small. And then there needs to be the stimulation, and that's where you use injections. And it's a bunch of days of injections. Liat's going to talk about it. And after about 12 days of injections, there's a surgical procedure to get the eggs out called an egg retrieval. It takes about 10 minutes to do. You go to sleep for it. And that's where we can get the eggs out and combine sperm and egg in the laboratory. Okay, so Liat, your doctor recommended IVF. Okay,
Yeah.
What'd you think? Do you want to do it?
No, who does? But you know, you got to do what you got to do. You got to just step up and move forward and keep going. So went through the process, all the injections, the whole, you know, they give you a calendar, what you're going to do every day. They give you this plan, all of the injections. You're purchasing all of them all at once. So now you kind of get this big giant bag from the pharmacy and you're like, what did I get myself into?
So let's talk about that for a second. So it starts with a period, but you have to do some prep work in advance. You can't just show up and say, give me medicine, right? You have to do some homework.
Yes.
Right? Did someone show you how to use the injections?
So they showed us how to use the injections. They sent us videos on like to watch, with our husbands, our partners, whatever, to learn how to do it. I will never forget sitting by the computer desk with him, watching the screen. We watched it like 10 times. And I couldn't believe that we were there.
Do you remember how many injections you did a day?
I think at a certain point, I think it was either 3 or 4 a day.
You were, yep. For how many days? Do you remember?
I don't remember exactly, but it felt like forever, honestly.
It was about 12 days of injections. And usually 2 injections in the morning and 2 at dinner time. Yeah. And describe that moment. So someone orders all of these medications for you. They're all injections, and you get a big FedEx box. And you opened it up, and what did you see?
I saw a big box of needles. And it's very scary. And then, you have to organize everything. You have to know exactly what you're doing because we're doing it ourselves. We can't mess it up. And every day, not only are we doing the injections and making sure we do that, but then at the same time, I have to wake up every morning between 6 and 7 a.m. to get to the doctor, to take blood work and sonograms to make sure that my body's progressing the way it should be. And then, depending on that, the dose changes every single day as well.
So during stimulation, during those 12 days of injections, you had to go to the doctor a lot.
Yeah.
Every day? Every other day?
At a certain point, I think in the beginning it's every other day, and then it ends up, especially once it's like crunch time, I think it's every single day.
So it's like 8 visits over a 2-week period of time.
Yeah.
What's it like to walk into the waiting room in that clinic in New York?
It's scary yet comforting at the same time because you're walking into this big giant room and there are hundreds of women in there. So when I say scary, it's scary that we're all kind of going through this, but then at the same time, it's very comforting, like Rachel said in the beginning, to know that you're not alone. And there are hundreds and thousands of women dealing with the same thing. But it's very overwhelming.
Did you, at that time, I wasn't your doctor at that time, did you have one doctor and one nurse, or was it a team of people that rotated?
So it's a team, which I didn't realize at the time. I guess it's normal for that practice. But now that I've experienced something completely different, I know how not okay that is. So I think it was up to 3 nurses, depending on who was on call, that day. And I wasn't guaranteed to see my doctor. It was whatever doctor was on call, that's who took care of me.
Okay. So you show up what time did you go to the office?
Between 6 and 7 a.m.
Okay. So the sun hasn't come up yet.
No.
And it's already crowded.
Yes.
How long are you in the office for?
Depending on the day, anywhere between 30 minutes to an hour.
Okay.
Just sitting there waiting.
And what did you have done when you were there?
Blood work.
Okay.
And sonograms.
So every day you had a blood work done. Every day you had a blood draw. More needles.
More needles.
Okay. And an internal ultrasound.
Yes.
And what were they doing?
Checking for my hormone levels.
Okay.
And then the ultrasound was checking the lining of my uterus to see, and how big the follicles are.
Yep. And so measuring the egg sac, they start off small, and those 12 days of injections, the goal is to get them to grow. Sorry about that. My brother Rafe was calling. Okay. So they get them to 15 to 22 millimeters in size. And when you get there, and how'd you feel? How'd your body feel? What did it do to your body? You're like a pincushion,
very
right?
bloated.
You have to keep injecting yourself.
So extremely bloated, extremely, very uncomfortable. I'm a person who normally, I feel my body ovulating every single month. I know exactly whether I'm injections or not. I know exactly which side, right, left. And this was very intense because it's not just one egg that's, growing, it's multiple. And I was actually feeling it on both sides, which is extremely, extremely uncomfortable.
Were you in pain?
I was in pain, and no, That's a lie. I wasn't in pain. I was extremely uncomfortable. Very
Were you
uncomfortable.
Were you like curled up in a ball in bed?
No, I was not curled up in a ball in bed. I was, my first go around, I did not work out at all. The second time, which you're laughing, I did work out. I was doing a lot of yoga, and then, am I allowed to say it?
Sure.
I was doing Soul Cycle.
How many classes a day were you doing?
1 to 2.
In the middle of your IVF. So it couldn't have been that bad if you were doing 2 Soul Cycle classes while injecting
No.
yourself. Okay.
No,
But
but
you
this
did
was
good.
my second go around, not my first.
But it did affect your body. But I mean, in all reality, right?
Yes, both times I gained 10 pounds before even being pregnant.
In like 2 weeks.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So you went through all of these injections, lots of office visits. The doctor says now's the time to get the eggs out. Okay. So you had an egg retrieval.
Yep.
Do you remember how many eggs you got off him?
I don't
Okay.
remember. It was so long ago.
Okay. So they combined sperm. So you blocked it out. Look at that.
I
It
blocked
goes
it
away.
out.
You forget about it. And so you got a bunch of eggs, and they combined sperm and egg. How'd they do it? Did they inject the sperm, or did they put it around?
So no, they did ICSI, which is
Right.
they injected the sperm directly into each egg.
Okay. And then they grew the embryos. And this is kind of where the art of IVF comes in. And so some people do a day 3 embryo transfer, and some people do a day 5 embryo transfer. Some people put in 1 embryo, and some people put in 2. What happened to you?
So they grew it till day 3. I went in on day 3, and they did a fresh, I guess a fresh transfer on
Okay.
day 3. And then they let the other ones grow for another 2 days, and
Yep.
then they froze them after that.
Okay. Did you get pregnant?
I did get pregnant.
Hey,
Yes.
great.
Yay.
And so tell me a little bit about that part. How many?
So they put in 2 embryos at the
Yep.
time. I did get pregnant with twins. And about, I believe it was 6 weeks in, one of the embryos disappeared.
Okay.
And I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, it's called a vanishing twin,
Yep.
right?
And so there was a sac, but there was nothing in the sac,
Exactly.
right? So one had a baby with a heartbeat, and the other was just a sac with nothing in it.
Yep.
Okay. And what happened to that pregnancy?
Thank God everything went well, full term. I was very, very lucky to have a extremely easy pregnancy after that. And
Okay.
I say that like God kind of tortured me
In
in the beginning and
Good.
then let me have an easy time after that.
Okay.
And yeah, I mean, she was born at 41 weeks. We were good.
Great. And how old is Joyce now?
She's going to be 7 in like 3 weeks.
Amazing. Okay. And you delivered vaginally or by C-section?
Vaginally.
Was it a high-risk pregnancy because you did IVF?
No.
You were like everybody else?
I was totally normal. They released me. I think you released at 8 weeks,
weeks,
right?
yep.
2 months.
Yep.
You go to your regular doctor.
Okay. Great. So you enjoyed Joyce for a while.
Yeah.
And after Joyce was born, did you do anything to not get pregnant?
So I didn't because it was just, I was trying for so long and I couldn't get pregnant. So I was like, all right, listen, I'm not going to protect. I know that everything at the end of the day is in Hashem's hands. If he wants it to happen, great. If he doesn't, we'll go through the process again. It just is
You
what
had
it
some
is.
frozen embryos, right? The next
I
baby
had
was
some frozen.
Okay. And so, because you knew that there was going to be another one waiting. IVF worked the first time, and the other embryos were frozen. They weren't tested. You didn't know if they were normal or not, but you anticipated you wouldn't have to do it again because you had those frozen embryos.
Yeah.
Okay. So, did you get pregnant?
So I got pregnant 10 months later after Joyce was born. The biggest shock of my life because I did not expect it at all.
Mm-hmm.
And that I lost that pregnancy at 16 weeks. Yeah.
I'm really sorry.
That was a rough one. But it was a blessing in disguise because when they tested, I did, what is that called? A DNC. When they took, what I think what they do is they kind of vacuum it out at that point.
They remove the tissue from the uterus.
Okay. Vacuuming it out is the wrong terminology. But what they do is they then test it. They genetically test it, and they saw that it was an abnormal pregnancy. So it is a blessing.
Yeah, it was supposed to happen.
But it was hard. It was supposed to happen.
Okay. It takes a while to recover from that, especially when it's far along, like 16 weeks.
Yeah, it was rough.
Okay.
And I love my husband to pieces, but he was so excited that he was telling everybody that I was pregnant. Yeah.
Did you see a therapist after that loss?
I didn't.
Do you think you should have?
I definitely should have.
Yeah.
I think I definitely 100% should have. I think I should have been seeing a therapist the entire process, honestly.
Okay.
And if I do it a third time, I think I will, for sure. Without a doubt.
So that pregnancy resolved. And then what happened?
Then I waited till Joyce was 2.5.
No more pregnancies.
No more pregnancies after that.
And still not protecting.
Not protecting.
And not getting pregnant.
No.
So me as a fertility doctor, I'm actually worried about you.
Thank you.
Right? Something's going on.
I hope so.
Right? The fact that you're not even having miscarriages is a sign. That's a concerning sign. Okay. So 2.5 years go by.
So 2.5 years go by, and we decided we're going to start the process over again.
Okay. Did you have to go back to the beginning to get eggs out again? Because you had those frozen embryos.
So I went back to the same doctor because I had the 2 frozen embryos, and we didn't have to go through the whole retrieval process because we had those 2 embryos. So he's like, great, let's go through the process of just transferring it in, which is a little bit easier. It's not as difficult as the retrieval process.
Much easier.
We put in one at a time, 2 months in a row, and both of them failed.
So let's talk about a frozen transfer for a second, okay? It starts with a period. We do an ultrasound, make sure the lining of the uterus is thin. The goal is to mimic a natural cycle. So we give a woman estrogen for 2 weeks to build the lining of the uterus to 8 millimeters. And after 5 days of a progesterone injection, the window of implantation should open. The window's open for about 16 hours and then it closes. And that's the only time the embryo has the chance to stick. And then you have to continue that medication. So what kind of progesterone were you using at that time?
So at the time I was using the injection progesterone.
Okay.
To me, that is one of the hardest parts of the entire process.
Where did the injection go?
It's in your lower back, upper butt.
Yeah.
And it's the same place every single night, over and over and over. And it clumps up and it hardens and you get little like hard balls in your lower back. I was massaging my back. I had a massage ball. I would get into the shower and just let the boiling hot water kind of run on my back to hopefully like break up the clumps. That I have to say, I could not wait for that part to just end. Okay. It was one of the worst parts for me, at least.
For a lot of people, hate the progesterone and oil. Yep, it does all of those things. Lumpy bumps on your butt, and it hurts, and it's a bigger needle. And how long? And so you have to use that for 5 days. They put the embryo in, and then you continue for 2 weeks.
Yes.
And then you do a pregnancy test. And you're like super hopeful because your embryo survived the thaw. It worked the first time. And you go for your HCG test.
And it was both times negative.
And after the first time, the doctor says, let's just do it again.
Yep.
And so you get a period, and you got to start over again. 2 weeks of estrogen, 5 days of progesterone, and it still doesn't work. How are you feeling now? There's no more embryos.
Very discouraged. And instead of telling me to do IVF, I was told, let's do IUIs again.
Go backwards. Okay.
So I'm following my doctor, and we did IUIs. I think I did either 2 or 3. I don't remember exactly. and those failed. And I remember at that, when I was in, I got that phone call that I had another negative test. I called up Steven and I was just like, Steve, something's not right. I said, I feel it in my gut. I'm not being paid attention to. This is not, whatever's happening here is not okay. And he told me, he's like, babe, are you sure? He's like, you're on a lot of medication. Maybe you're just being sensitive. Maybe you're being hormonal. And I told him, I'm like, Steve, I'm telling you, it is not in my head. I'm not being hormonal. I'm telling you something is not right. He's like, okay, let's go somewhere else. And that's when I came to you.
Did you think, at that point you weren't going to have any more kids?
No.
Okay.
Because I knew the first go around was successful and I knew that it was a possibility. So that fear, listen, anything's a possibility, right? But that fear that I had the first time of never having a child, it wasn't really there. And the second go around was definitely easier than the first because I already had her. I had Joyce and she was there to distract me. And I was so grateful for her that it just made the second time around a little bit easier.
That's a very common sentiment. And were you more amenable to doing another IVF cycle, having done it once? Or did you groan about doing another IVF cycle?
I kind of was just like, all right, if this is my journey, like, let's do it. Like, it just
going.
is what it is. Like, there's no point in being upset about it. Like, I just have to kind of put the blinders on and just go.
So how do we meet each other?
I called you. I called you to ask you your advice.
In full disclosure, Liat's husband is my wife's cousin. Yeah. So we knew each other from family. But I didn't know any of this story, Liat. I knew none of it. Every time we were together, whatever Shabbat we were together for, I didn't know. You never talked to me about it. I never knew any of it you were going through. I knew there was Joyce in the end, but then you called me.
Yep.
Okay.
I called you to ask you your advice, told you the whole story, what was going on, the back and forth. And you told me, your response was, it would be my pleasure to treat you if you would be willing to come to Pennsylvania. And
I didn't have an office in Manhattan at the time.
And I spoke to Steven and he said, let's do it. We have nothing to lose. Let's go. So I got all of my records from Cornell. They sent it directly to you. And we came in.
And what we did?
For our first meeting. We sat down. It was pretty awesome. We sat down.
You came from the city, right? You were living in Manhattan at the time.
I was living in Manhattan. We came. We sat down in your office, and I'll never forget. You told me. Well, you asked us first. What did Cornell tell you? Okay, I was trying not to say it the whole time.
You did great. Keep talking.
What did they tell you?
What did your doctor? Yeah.
What did your doctor tell you your issue was? And unexplained infertility. And you said, well, based on their records, I need to do some testing to verify the information. But based on their records, I'm going to tell you what your issue is before you leave here today. And that was the biggest moment for me because here I was going to a really, really big practice with my files and all of the information right there, but the answer was unexplained infertility. And here I am coming to you, look, you're looking at someone else's records, and you were able to give me the answer, right then and there.
What are we talking about?
And my issue is I have low AMH levels.
Mm-hmm.
I guess you can explain what that is.
AMH is the hormone made from next month's eggs. So women are born with a set number of eggs. It's not like blood. You make more blood all the time. Your mom gives you some number of eggs, and whatever you get, that's what you get. The eggs you have stored for the future make AMH. So if you have a high number, you have a lot of eggs. If the number's low, you have fewer eggs than your friends. Many women with a low AMH will also have lower quality eggs, meaning more prone to miscarriage. And so we found that Liat had a low AMH, and that may be some of her unexplained infertility. She may have had more abnormal ones than some of her friends. And so what'd we do?
So you came up with a plan, and that's my biggest takeaway, is that a small practice will actually take care of you, right? You care, you love everybody. You looked at my records and you said, this is the plan. This is what we're going to do. And sorry, we decided to do 2 retrievals in a row, because the younger I am, the better chance I am to get more eggs than to have to wait between pregnancies or between cycles or anything like that. And that's what we did. And we froze everything, and then we went into frozen transfers.
Different. So let's think about that for a second. So when we were together, you were driving from Manhattan.
Yep.
Right? How was that?
It was rough. Thankfully, I was able, I hired someone to drive me in the mornings, but I was waking up 4:30, 5 a.m. some days, get into the car. Now, because somebody was driving me, I was able to sleep in the back seat, but it was exhausting, to say the least.
More injections.
Exhausting. More injections, more blood work, more sonograms. But the beautiful part was I was able to do outside monitoring. So some of the beginning monitoring I was able to do in the city, where they then sent you the results.
Yep. And so I was responsible for you. I kept changing your dosing. We got a whole batch of eggs. We did the ICSI procedure. Yep. Very similar. And we grew the embryos, not for 3 days, but for 5 days. And this time we tested the embryos. We took a piece of the cells, it's called PGTA. We took 3 cells from the placenta part. We froze the rest of the embryo, and we're able to count the number of chromosomes in each embryo and figure out which are the normal ones and which are the miscarriages. And we did it once, and we found some, and we wanted to be sure that there'd be enough for the future, because your prior frozen embryos didn't result in another delivery. So we didn't want to be in that position where you got older, then having fewer eggs, lower quality, and not being able to continue to grow a family. It's a process called banking embryos, and it's a controversial practice. And I will tell you, Liat, I don't do it for a lot of people, and I discourage people from doing it. Usually because it's really expensive, and we don't know what the outcome is going to be. So, but you were, had foresight. You said, I want to do this, and this is important to you. So you did it again. So even though you had some normal embryos to work with, we actually didn't know they were normal yet. But even though you had embryos frozen, you still chose to go back to the beginning, pull a new batch of eggs and a new batch of embryos. Are you crazy?
Possibly.
Why'd you do it?
Because I trust you, honestly.
That's not a good answer.
Because it's the smart thing to do, honestly. Listen, the reality is, women in general, right? The older we get, the harder it is to get pregnant and all of that stuff. And the quality and the quantity does go down. So with somebody with my issue, if I were to get pregnant from that first retrieval and then have to wait again another 2-3 years, my chances the next go around are going to be much smaller.
And so we then made a whole bunch of embryos. I think you had something like 9 altogether. And
I don't remember.
Some were normal and some were abnormal. And then we went through a frozen transfer again, progesterone oil injections in the butt all over again. And we put 1 embryo in. And I recommend just 1 at a time. In my laboratory, if I put in more than 1, I don't get more people pregnant. Half of them have twins. So I like to go 1 at a time. That's my recommendation. I have twins myself. And so personally and professionally, I love them both. I think it's good to have 1 at a time so they don't come too early. And so we put in 1 embryo. And what happened?
And it stuck. The first go around stuck.
Oh my gosh.
And I was pregnant.
Yeah.
And correct me if I'm wrong, did I lose it at 5.5 weeks, was it?
Yeah.
Or 6 weeks?
Another miscarriage.
Yeah.
Even with a normal embryo.
Yeah.
Ugh, happens 12% of the time. And so it just didn't do what it's supposed to do. And this is one of the amazing things about my job. I tell people that if this works, it's not because I was good or smart or any of those things. It's because I was in the room when you got lucky. I can't make the eggs good. I can't make the embryos normal. I could find them if they're there, and I could put them in the right place. But after that, it's not up to me, and it's not up to you. It's up to that little embryo and the higher power. And so it didn't do what it was supposed to do. Okay, so another miscarriage. Isn't that your second miscarriage?
Yep.
Okay, so what happened? Got a period?
Got a period. And that's when you and Steven tried to, you did convince me that I needed to take a break. And I needed to just step back, and I needed a month or two where I did absolutely nothing and just lived my life and went on vacation. And I cried. I didn't want to, because I was just like, I'm already in this. I'm already injecting myself. I'm already 10 pounds heavier. I already feel like crap, excuse my language. I just want to keep going. Like, why do we have to stop? And you both worked very hard to convince me to stop. And I did. And we went on vacation. I think it was October or November at the time. And we came back beginning of January, and that's when we started again.
And you told me there's no way I'm using progesterone injections ever again in my life.
I did.
Right. You
That
made
was the
promise
conclusion.
I would never do that to you again.
Yes.
So what did we do?
So we went through another frozen transfer, and you gave me the suppositories instead.
And we just did it as a natural cycle frozen transfer. Meaning I didn't give you medication. You grew your own egg. We triggered an ovulation. And 7 days later, I put the embryo in. That's normally when it would want to stick. And I give you a couple of vaginal suppositories along the way. Yep. And what happened?
And I got pregnant.
And what happened?
And now she's almost 3.
Yeah. And I told Liat the other day that one of the most special times of my professional career is when I got to hold Bella for the first time. Because it was really cool that I knew Liat and Steven for a long time, and I helped them have a baby, and then I knew that baby as an embryo. And then I got to hold her, and that was really cool. So thank you for giving me that opportunity.
I remember that day.
Yeah. And so now there are more embryos. Okay. And when you're ready, give me a call.
You got it.
And, I really applaud you, Liat, for sharing this story. And I know that over the years, this has really become a passion for you. And so thank you very much for sharing it with other people. And, we're going to take some questions at the end. But I'd like to hear from you kind of why this is a passion for you, and what advice do you have for people going through this?
So this became a passion for me and Steven. We're both extremely open about it because you never know who you can help along the way. My story is completely different than every other person, but there might be something about my story that someone else will connect to, whether it be the emotional part of it, how I felt physically, how many miscarriages, regardless of what it is. I feel like I can connect to so many people. And it's really, really important to not feel alone through the process. The first time that I went through it, I felt really, really alone, even though, I had Steven and he was by my side and supporting me, and he was everything at the time. We all love our husbands, but at the end of the day, you still feel like you're doing it alone because we're the ones taking the injections. We're the ones kind of going through every single day. But looking back, he was going through his own stuff, in a different way. So just to remember that you're not alone, to try to be open to it. If not, obviously nobody's telling you to go on Instagram Live and do this, but see a therapist, speak to somebody, a support group, reach out to somebody who can understand. So that's the first thing. Second thing that I think everybody should keep in mind is there's a reason for everything. it's very possible that my journey was to do nothing else but to help other people. Maybe to make me appreciate my children a little bit more. I don't know, but there's a reason for everything. Like, you know, losing, having the vanishing twin the first go around. I think Hashem knew I couldn't handle twins. You know, the miscarriage that I had 10 months later, Hashem knew that I probably couldn't handle kids 18 months apart or whatever it is. I can't do math. Whatever it is, the process there, like you said, there's a higher power and there's a reason for everything. And then the last thing, that my biggest piece of advice is stress. It's very hard when you're in it to not stress and not be anxious every single second. But if you can find something, anything, move, go for a walk, do yoga, meditate, whatever it is that you can do to de-stress yourself is the best thing in the world. Not because it's going to change the outcome, but because it'll just make your process a little bit easier. And that's it. Like those were my biggest takeaways from the last 9 years.
Liat, thank you for sharing your story with us.
Thank you for being here.
I really applaud your courage to share it with other people and your passion for this field. And I really hope that other people respond to what you shared with them and are open with and look to find somebody else to talk to.
I hope so.
Do you have some questions? I think you, as the moderator, may be able to see some of the questions. And so if you see one or two questions that you want to share in our last few minutes, we could do that.
Oh, you can't see anything?
I can't see questions. Give me an
Okay,
easy
if anybody has questions. A lot of thank yous for sharing our story, and it's very informative. I'm not seeing questions. Guys, put questions in.
I think we're going to call it a night, Liat.
All right, beautiful. Here we go. What would you suggest doing with leftover frozen embryos?
Oh, wow. That's a good question. And that's something that we talk about. And so, good. Frozen embryos. We're seeing a bunch of, I see some questions. Good. Frozen embryo questions. So embryos are frozen in liquid nitrogen. And it's minus 180 degrees centigrade. Biology stops. They're frozen in time. And so we have pregnancies 20 years later after embryos are frozen. And so they're really frozen at the stage they were preserved in, and they can regrow again and start dividing and go back to resume their biology. So they can be frozen indefinitely. Extra embryos. There's a couple of different options for extra embryos, and I'm going to present to you the medical options, not the halachic options. The medical options are, some people will choose to discard an embryo, meaning they finished building their family, right? They have 4 or 5 kids and they have 2 more embryos and they don't want to have any more kids. And so some people choose not to use those embryos. And so we take them out of the freezer, we put them in a petri dish, and then they dissolve. They go back to their proteins and their amino acids, and we discard an empty petri dish. Some people will donate them to research. No embryo is going to be born, but someone will study no baby will be born, but somebody will study stem cells from them. Some people will donate them to another couple in need. It's called embryo donation. Unusual in our community, but other communities do that. And some people leave them frozen indefinitely, which is very expensive. What advice would you tell someone who's starting the IVF process?
Me?
Sure. If you had one piece of advice.
Oh my God, this is such a hard question.
Okay.
Hang in there.
Okay.
Be strong. And cry when you want to.
That's right. I like that answer. I tell people I have many ways of disappointing them. I only have one way to make them happy. And so, yeah, there's a lot of ups and downs on this journey.
A lot.
But very often I know where the end is. I don't know the path we take to get there, but I know where we'll end up. Someone asked, can we check embryos for genetic disorders? We do it all the time, and I have a whole bunch of patients like that. So very often people are doing preconception genetic screening, and I strongly encourage people to do that. Remember, we all have 2 copies of DNA, one from mom and one from dad. And so we all have lots of good genes, but they're covering up the bad ones we carry. Well, if you and your partner have the same bad gene, there's a 25% chance of having a sick kid, a really sick kid, many that are going to pass young. And so when I find couples, or couples find me, that they each carry the same genetic disorder, they're not infertile. We go through the same process. We generate embryos. We don't only test them their miscarriages, we also test them for the disease. And then they have the same chances of success once we get a normal, unaffected embryo. Okay. Liat, thank you so much for this evening. I really enjoyed talking to you. Shana Tova. And I hope everybody has a safe and healthy holiday. I know I'm praying for lots of people.